Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Toxic Boyo, continuing to have absolutely no credentials regarding the things that I like to talk about here. But I've been playing a lot of God of War Ragnarok recently because it just got added to PlayStation Plus, so I immediately reinstalled it and just hopped back in and started a brand new Game Plus, and I've been playing it quite a lot. Um, it's probably my favorite PS5 game. Is that fair to say? I mean, what else could you compare it to? Spider-Man 2, Miles Morales, Gran Turismo, Horizon, Ratchet and Clank. I mean, I haven't played everything on the PS5, but yeah, I feel pretty confident saying that God of War Ragnarok is my favorite PS5 game. That being said, though, there's a lot that you could say regarding the PS5 and more so this generation of consoles, the ninth generation, because we are about halfway through. A little bit more than halfway through, I would say. Uh, if we're assuming that this generation will be 7 years, we are 4 years in and some change, so that puts us at a little bit more than halfway through. And it's kind of gone down as an underwhelming generation. Um, and I've been thinking about that a lot lately because the Nintendo Switch 2 just got revealed recently, and the Switch is a phenomenon. It's a sensation. You know, it's the long prophesied second coming of the Wii, you know, and it's really impressive that Nintendo was able to bounce back so thoroughly from the Wii U, but yeah, it's the most successful console to come out in the last 15 years. Um, and if Nintendo continues to do what they've been doing, which is producing high quality, enjoyable, fun games that people want to play, and they continue to nail their price point with the hardware, the Switch 2 is going to make waves just as big as the Switch did, you know? Um, Nintendo is putting out games people want to play. They're putting them out at a regular pace. They've got so many brands under their umbrella. Um, you could put the Switch in your pocket, you know, put it in your backpack, take it on the plane, take it on a train. If you're riding shotgun on a road trip, you can play it there. Um, you can play it on your TV if you want, but I don't really know too many people that actually do that. But yeah, and you look at how the rest of the generation has gone. Because I don't know if you want to count the Wii or the Switch as part of the previous generation or this current one. I say it's part of this current one, and it was the first one to hit the market. But the PS5 has also been kind of beating the crap out of the Xbox Series family of consoles, and that's unfortunate to say. I think it's like something like 4 or 5 to 1, which is almost as bad as it was when the Xbox first came out in 2001. But this generation has just not been great. There's a lot of videos about it. There's a lot to be said about what's happened to console generations, and I think that there's a lot of factors that come together to impact the future of console gaming as a whole, but we're here to talk about consoles today. Um, there's things to be said about the life cycle of a console generation itself, the online focused mentality that game developers have nowadays and publishers have, this live service model that we've begun to adapt, how long it takes to develop a game, complications with console exclusivity, and publisher expectations, and I want to talk about how all of that kind of comes together to impact how a generation is defined and how it's remembered, and what it means for this generation going forward. I want to talk first about console exclusivity. There's a lot of back and forth when it comes to that. There's people that think it harms the industry, that it's anti-consumer, that it's bad for gamers. You know, gaming shouldn't be about gatekeeping software to one platform or another. There's been a lot of praise thrown Phil Spencer's way for Xbox and Microsoft's initiative to put their games on other platforms. You know, Hi-Fi Rush is on PS5 now. The Medium's on PS5. State of Decay is coming to PS5. The Indiana Jones game is hitting PS5 soon. Halo is going to be on PS5 in the near future. That's crazy to think about, right? And to me, that looks like the first stage of Microsoft going the way of Sega. You know, back in the late 90s, Sega made a few critical mistakes in the console market, and they got swept up by Sony. You know, they the Saturn got beat down by the PS1, the Dreamcast got beat down by the PS2, and by the time the PS3 came around, Sega was a publisher. That's all they were. They had gotten out of the console industry. And you look at Xbox, the PS2 beat down the original console. The PS3 and 360 kept it competitive until the very end, but the 360 did lose that generation. And the PS4 beat the Xbox One down so bad, and it's happening again. You know, this is 4 times now that Xbox has failed to take down Sony. They have never won a generation. You could give them the 360 considering that they had the biggest market share here in the United States, but worldwide, particularly in Japan, where the market is really important, they've never been able to, you know, they've never really been able to get it accomplished, get it done. And they just don't succeed in that area, right? And you combine that fact with the fact that Xbox games are now starting to go to consoles like the PlayStation and the Switch, and, you know, there's Game Pass on PC. It looks like in 3 or 4 years, when the next console generation rolls around, it might just be Sony hitting store shelves. Because I don't think that console gaming is particularly going to go away. I mean, the PS5 has sold like 60 million units in the last couple years. Not selling as crazy as the PS4, but that's for a number of reasons. But still, enough to consider console gaming worth pursuing in the future, if you ask me. The Switch has sold like 150 million units over the last 7.5 years. They're going to continue to make consoles. Console gaming is not going to die, at least not anytime soon. But with the matter of console exclusivity, it's something that I go back and forth on. I do think it's important to give people a reason to buy your thing instead of the other guy's thing. You see it in smartphones, you see it in automobiles, you see it in refrigerators, for crying out loud. Companies and corporations will always design their products with something in mind that makes you want this thing over the other one. And when we're talking about video game consoles, that is mostly going to come down to video games. Yes, you can have several games on standby with the Xbox Series X that you can go back to and hop right in, pick up where you left off. The PS5 doesn't have that. You can plug in a little Seagate extension memory card SSD, and boom, you got another 2 terabytes of storage. You don't have to crack a console open. PS5 doesn't have that. But PS5 does have God of War, Horizon, Gran Turismo, Demon's Souls, Ratchet & Clank. You know, there's all these games that you want to buy a PlayStation for. And yes, these games have all and or will all land on PC at some point. Whereas Xbox games land on PC day and date. That's a big difference. And to you as a gamer, that's going to depend on whether you want to wait. But the thing is, a PS5 is pretty much always going to be easier to get than a PC that can run these PS5 games at that same level. I can boot up my PlayStation, throw in Spider-Man 2, and get 60 frames a second with 1080p and ray tracing. My PS5 costs $500. A $500 PC can't do that. You know, if you want a decent graphics card that can pull that off, you want at least a 2060, maybe even a 2080, or you might just be better off grabbing something from the 30 series, and those have gotten more affordable, sure. You can get a 3060 for like $300 now, but boom, that's already over half of the price of the PlayStation, and you still need a case, and a motherboard, and a CPU, and RAM, and storage, you know? So it's different. I think that console gaming will always have its place for as long as there is gaming to be done, but when it comes to console exclusivity in certain games, I will never believe that it's outright bad for the industry. You need to incentivize people to buy your thing over the other one. I only really see people complaining about PlayStation doing it. You go on Twitter, you go on YouTube, you go on TikTok, people will complain about Sony being anti-consumer and gatekeeping Spider-Man, God of War, Ratchet & Clank, whatever, by not putting it on Xbox, or by waiting so long to put it on PC. Same thing with Final Fantasy, how they have a 1-year exclusivity deal with Square Enix every time a new Final Fantasy comes out. I just don't agree with that, though, because Nintendo is never going to put The Legend of Zelda, or Super Mario, or Super Smash Bros. On PlayStation, or PC, or Xbox. But nobody complains about that. They're willing to buy a Switch just for the sake of playing those games. But when it comes to buying a PlayStation just for the sake of playing the games I mentioned before, that's where it suddenly becomes anti-consumer. I don't think that it's fair to compare Sony maintaining exclusivity on certain franchises and brands to Microsoft putting their games on as many platforms as possible. Because from the eyes of a cynic, which is what I am, I see it as Xbox as a brand becoming less and less valuable as time goes on. They say the Game Pass is profitable. I believe that. But the Xbox consoles are not profitable at all. I see it as Microsoft doing what they can to stay afloat. I think it, well, not Microsoft, because obviously Windows is huge and they're going to remain liquid for the rest of time, but Xbox is kind of dying out. Forgive me if you disagree, but I think that that's what this is, and this is Microsoft doing what they can to keep Xbox in the discussion. They're not doing what they're doing for the sake of gamers. I mean, look at what happened with the Xbox One. That's definitely not the motivation behind this. They're doing it to save the Xbox brand. Sony isn't in a situation where they need to do that. They've never really been in a situation where they've needed to do that. The only PlayStation console to not sell 100 million units was the PS3, but now they did the 360. The Wii won that generation, you know? Sony, since the PlayStation came out in 1994, has been and will continue to be okay, with or without exclusives. From there, I want to move on to just the culture of gaming as a whole right now. I think, I'm not actually sure who just put it out. I think it was Games Radar. There was a list that just came out of what the top 10 best-selling games of 2024 were. There was 2K, there was Madden, there was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and Black Ops 6, and college football, and the college football Madden bundle. Pretty much all shooters and sports games, with the exception of Elden Ring. Helldivers 2 was in there as well, which doesn't surprise me. But for like 90% of the market, it was shooting games, sports games, and then Elden Ring, which is really cool to see that, you know, the DLC was so big that it got people buying Elden Ring in enough numbers to put it in the same conversation as 2 Call of Duty games. But that's really indicative of where we are. You'll see people say that gaming is in a rut, that gaming's dying, gaming doesn't hit like it used to. But all they play is sports games and shooters. They don't play RPGs or RTS or puzzle platformers or character action games or anything like that. They don't branch out. And even with those other types of games, you look at these huge flagship franchises that Sony and Microsoft are banking on right now, even Nintendo to a certain degree. Games take so long to make now that it's kind of depressing. I remember in 2023 when Star Wars Jedi Survivor came out, and it was a huge controversy because it was not ready even in the slightest by the time it came out. I didn't play it until late 2024, and it still wasn't ready. Games are coming out so half-baked and unfinished now because they're just not given enough time, because they take so long to make. And every year of development is money coming out of investors' pockets. Investors want these games out as early as possible to see a return on their investment. That's why Cyberpunk released in the state that it was in, completely unfinished and unplayable. And things like that are becoming the norm, because games take sometimes 10 years to develop. Look at how much time passed between Red Dead Redemptions 1 and 2. And yeah, you could say they were working on GTA 5 in between, but still, 5 years passed between GTA 5 and Red Dead 2. 12 years will have passed between GTA 5 and GTA 6. There were 3 Grand Theft Auto games on PS2, 3 major ones. San Andreas, was it Liberty City, and GTA 3. And then GTA 5 was on 3 PlayStations. You know, it's different now. And yes, games are getting more ambitious. We are able to do more with the hardware, and we're able to get more realistic graphics and higher frame rates and ray tracing and all sorts of things like that. But does that matter? You know, games can only look so realistic. The graphical leaps that we saw between the PS1 to 2 and the 2 to 3 and even the 3 to 4 is not really present with the 4 to 5. All that's really changed is performance. That's why we're on SSD now. Look how fast these games can load. There are no load screens. You can move this fast, you can fast travel in an instant. That's great. That's cool. But how does that make the game better? You know? I want games that are fun. I want games that are enjoyable. You know, going back to PlayStation games, there were 2 years left in the PS4's life cycle when Marvel Spider-Man released. And then 5 years passed, and Spider-Man 2 released 3 years into the PS5's life cycle. I don't know if Spider-Man 3 is going to be on PS5 or on PS6. Games take so long to develop now that if you got $100 million to make a AAA action game for the PlayStation, and you started right now, it would probably release for the PS6. Any game that's coming out for the PS5 for the next 3 to 4 years has already been in development for about that long. Ghost of Yotai, it probably started working on it in 2021. Wolverine? Is Wolverine coming out? We don't even know. We don't have a clue, actually. Is there going to be another God of War game on PS5? Will there be another Horizon game on PS5? Or are these franchises just going to put one game on each generation until it fizzles out? Because they need so much time. I mean, we saw from the data mine how much stuff was cut out of Spider-Man 2. That game had 5 years to cook and was still not ready when it released. Jedi Survivor cooked for 4 years and was still not ready for release. What does it take? You know, how is it sustainable to spend $200 million over the course of 8 years to develop a game? You know, it's upsetting. And with companies pushing so hard towards this live service model because they see the success in a game like Helldivers 2 and they think that that's what gamers want all the time, but you look at the graveyard of skeletons of Destiny and Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad and Anthem and Predator Hunting Grounds and all these other live service strictly multiplayer games that come out and are sent out to die right away. Babylon's Fall, Godfall, these games. EA told us a couple of years ago that they don't think gamers want single-player experiences anymore. If that's the case, why did God of War Ragnarok sell 20 million copies? Why has Spider-Man 2 sold 20 million copies? People still like single-player games. And the push towards every game kind of looking the same as distinctive art styles have fallen by the wayside, and everything is about looking as photorealistic as possible. You can see Senua's pores when you look at her face. You want these single-player experiences as a gamer, and then when they come out and they're not finished, or they're disappointing, they don't live up to expectations, oops, you have to wait a minimum of 5 years for another try. I remember a time where there were three God of War games within 5 years, and that doesn't include the PSP game. Three Devil May Cry games within 4 years, and now Devil May Cry 5, even the special edition, is almost 5 years old. You know, God of War Ascension to 4 was 5 years. 4 to Ragnarok was 4 years. And it's been almost 3 years since then, and we haven't heard anything. Even fighting games. You know, the PS2 had, I want to say, 4 Mortal Kombat games. And then there were 2? No. There was 1 Mortal Kombat game on PS3. 2 on PS4, and so far 1 on PS5. Tekken. There were 3 games on PS1. 3 games on PS2, 3 on PS3 if you include Street Fighter Cross, and Tag 2, 1 on PS4, so far 1 on PS5. The market isn't sustainable like this. AAA gaming doesn't work, you know? And that's why I'm so glad that we have the indie market, and that we can count on people with $5 budgets and a dream to still churn out some of the most fun games you've played in a long time. But big budget games that push consoles just aren't around anymore. Or not necessarily to say that, it's just there's a lot less to be excited about when you can't even be sure that the game that you're about to spend $70 on and give up 1/6 of your available memory to install is even going to be finished. And if it doesn't come out satisfactory, God knows when you're going to see a sequel. And that's if the publisher doesn't shutter the company. You know, how many developers like Tango or who worked on Anthem? Is that BioWare? Is BioWare still alive? They're probably on like their last try, but like Bullfrog or LucasArts, you know, how many of these companies have been sent off to the great game development studio in the sky because a game that they didn't want to make or have no experience making came out, didn't meet expectations, and it just didn't work out anymore. Or they were working on something, the company didn't want to spend any more money on it, so the game got canceled, company got sent out to die. It just doesn't work. You know, we're looking at console generations. I mean, look, the PS1 lasted 6 years, and obviously these consoles still got support after the next generation came out, but like between the release of the PS1 and 2 was 6 years in Japan. The 2 to 3, 6 years. The 3 to 4, 7 years. The 4 to 5, 7 years. It's already been 4 years. PS5 Pro is out. They are absolutely working on the PS6 as we speak. And we're looking back at a generation that has been defined by what? Live service and barely even having any exclusive games, which is another thing. I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. People say the PS5 has no games. All the time. They've been saying it since it came out. But then, in the same breath, they say that console exclusivity hurts gamers. Which side? Which is it? Do you want console games to be exclusive or not? Anyway. You look back on the PS5, and so far, within those first 4 years, we've had some big games. Miles, Spider-Man 2, God of War, Gran Turismo, Horizon, Ratchet and Clank, Returnal, Final Fantasy weren't huge, but they were there. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has actually been bigger than Final Fantasy 16, but let's look back at the PS4. Those first 4 years gave us Bloodborne, Uncharted 4, The Last of Us Remastered, whatever, Infamous Second Son, The Order 1886, Killzone Shadowfall, Knack. Like, there were some flops there, but what else did we have? Horizon Zero Dawn. Oh gosh, what else did we have? I think Persona was already out. The new Ratchet and Clank had come out. And there was still a lot on the horizon to look forward to. Like, we didn't have a release date for The Last of Us 2 or Spider-Man or God of War or Detroit yet, but even up to that point, there had been so much that had already come out and was already loved, and we knew that there were things on the horizon to look forward to. PS5, yes, there's been some good games, there's been some great games, and we do know that we've got Ghost of Yotai coming, but what after that? I don't know what 2026 holds for PlayStation or 2027. I barely even know what the rest of 2025 holds for PlayStation. I don't know when the Wolverine game's coming out. I don't know when Spider-Man 3 is coming out. I don't know when God of War 6 is coming out. It's, you know, is Ratchet and Clank getting another game? Will Jack and Daxter ever be back? Probably not. Will Sly the Dragon, will Sly Cooper ever be back? Probably not. There are so many franchises just kind of sitting around. Like, we know that Naughty Dog is working on Intergalactic. I can tell you with confidence, right now, at the very beginning of 2025, that will not be a PS5 game. I already know. And I know that because there was no gameplay to show. If the game is still so early in development that there was no gameplay to show off, it's not coming out for the current consoles. That's where we're at now. And that's what I think Nintendo does so well, right? Yes, 6 years passed in between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. There still hasn't been a sequel or a follow-up to Mario Odyssey. Yes, there was no new Mario Kart game for the Switch, but look how many Mario Parties came out. Look how big of a deal Smash Brothers was. There's one Smash per main console consistently since the N64. Pokemon had its ups and downs, but still did well on the Switch. There were plenty of Zelda franchise games. There was Link's Awakening. There was Hyrule Warriors 2. Zelda... What is it? Temple... No, something of Wisdom. I can't remember. She just got a game. Princess Peach got a game. The Mario RPG remake was a pretty big success. Paper Mario was a big deal. Metroid Dread was really good, and it was there to kind of, you know, keep us satiated while they worked on Metroid Prime 4. And yes, there are games like F-Zero, Star Fox, you know, that we're waiting to see again. But Nintendo is still putting out games with distinct art styles, games in beloved franchises that have been around for decades, games that you want to play, and they're still the most affordable console on the market. You can get a brand new Nintendo Switch OLED for cheaper than a PS5 digital. The only thing that the Switch OLED costs more than is the Xbox Series S. But you'd still probably rather buy the Switch, right? There's just something about the way that Nintendo understands the market. That even their flops, like the Wii U, and the N64, and the GameCube, they were still ambitious in certain ways. They've still been able to put out genre-defining games almost every single generation. I mean, obviously Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda 1985 need no introduction, but Mario 64, Majora's Mask, I should have said Ocarina of Time. I don't know why I thought of Majora's Mask first, but Wind Waker, Mario Galaxy, Star Fox 64, you know, Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Metroid Prime. There's just something that I don't know, they're working some sort of magic over there. I don't personally love the Switch. I've bought and owned two, and I've never really found myself itching to use them. But still, like, as far as a company that's able to give gamers what they want on a consistent basis, Nintendo is dominating. And that's why even if Microsoft bows out of the next console generation, and even if Sony doesn't have that much longer to go because of their development cycles and their culture and what they've got going on over there, Nintendo's going to be fine. I think it would be interesting to see that Nintendo was the first major console manufacturer to show up after the crash of 85 or 84, was it? 83? Something like that. And it would be so interesting to see them outlast the other two that came in and created the big three. That would be something. You know, if they snuffed out Atari's attempt to return, and they snuffed out Sega and Microsoft and Apple's attempt, and Sony and whoever else has come along and tried to do a console, Google for crying out loud, Amazon, that would be something for the history books. But yeah, that's I've been rambling for quite a while about why this generation feels so empty and feels so unmemorable compared to previous generations. And this is all stuff that started with the PS4 generation, but it's only gotten worse since this generation began, and it's more blatant and it's harder to ignore. So that's what I think about the whole thing. You guys can absolutely let me know if you agree or disagree. I'd love to hear it. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Subscribe while you're down there. Leave a like, you know, if you've made it to this point in the video. Tell me what your favorite console is. I'll go first. The PlayStation 2. I know it's a cop-out answer, but, you know, I was born in 99, right before the PS2 came out, and so that's the console that I played the absolute most growing up. Now it's probably the PS4 that I've got the most hours on, but yeah. That's enough of me talking for right now. See you later.